Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Whether you're watching a video or listening to a podcast version, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. Links to videos or MP3 files can be found at miamighostchronicles.com. You can also find information about my talk show appearances and any new book projects at marlenepardo.com, or go to Amazon and look up my author profile as Marlene Pardo Pellicer. I narrate several podcast series that can be found on major podcast platforms and also listened to via Alexa, Sonos, and other home systems. Look for Supernatural Storytime for scary storytelling, Nightshade Diary for classic horror and adventure stories, and of course Stories of the Supernatural for interviews with different guests as we talk about the mysteries of the unexplained. If you want to get noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy theories, and just about anything that is plain weird, you can visit Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles Stories of the Supernatural. How's everybody doing? Good, I hope. I'm doing good. You know, it's the same thing. When I say last year, it's kind of like a crazy year. And what can I say? I went, where was it that I went? What store? And it was August, and all of a sudden I'm looking and I'm seeing Halloween stuff, and it's like, oh, Halloween, they got old Halloween. And it's like, no, that's new Halloween stuff. So commercialism is, yeah, all right. By I imagine pretty soon we'll be seeing Thanksgiving and Christmas stuff out by the end of in a couple of weeks. But yeah, it's incredible to believe that 2020 now is winding down according to businesses. But it's a good thing, I guess, you know. But yeah, we're moving into the fall. Everything is crazy. I know a lot of people are still kind of like, depending on where you're living in the United States, you're having a hard time depending on the COVID-19 situation, everything else with the economy. 2020, I'm telling you, it's like most people I know are thinking, okay, so when's 2021 coming on? But anyway, let's talk about stuff that helps us forget all this weird stuff that's going on, okay? This is what this show's about.
We'll talk about weirdness.
Yes. And let me introduce who the guest is. They've been here before. And the name of this group is Black Hills Paranormal Investigation. They were founded back in 2007, and they're proud to serve the Black Hills and its surrounding communities. Since their founding, they've grown into a professional and trusted team of paranormal researchers. And in the beginning, they set out believing that to be taken as serious investigators, they had to set a very high standards for themselves and for their practices. Their guiding principles are critical thinking, common sense, continuing education, and a healthy dose of skepticism. And you know very well that I've spoken many times as a paranormal investigator that despite what many people think, most investigators, that should be number one on your list, a high threshold as far as to accept something that's paranormal. And of course that comes along with skepticism. But let me introduce them all. I want to introduce first Mo Miller, which is the lead investigator. How are you doing today, Mo?
Fine, and how are you doing, Marlene?
Great, fantastic, crazy. Glad to see that you were able to gather a group together because we had such a good time the last time that we did the interview. If you want to introduce the team members that are there.
Certainly. Okay, and if you guys know me, I'm Maurice Miller. Most people know me as Mo. I'm the lead investigator for Black Hills Paranormal Investigations. Over here, this gentleman with the nice white hair is Mr. Mark Shadley. He's our co-lead investigator.
Hello.
And you might remember Leanne Harlan. She's one of our investigators. A new investigator, we've had her for about a year or so, is Kaylee Johnson right here. Okay. And then, special treat, sitting here with us is Danny Jo Butler. She's also on the team, but she's also a psychic/medium. And if you know from talk to us in the past that we were kind of sketchy as far as psychic mediums go.
Yeah, but you were kind of up in the air about that.
She really watered our eyes when it came to, doing the paranormal investigations and explaining stuff to us. And that's why we brought her on.
Okay, fantastic. That's great. You know what? Most of the investigations that I've been in, having either, if you want to call them a psychic or a sensitive or anybody, it helps. It helps. But again, you know, I understand where you're coming from as far as you want to make sure that who you bring on the team is somebody that you're like, you believe in, basically is what it boils down to. So,
separating fly shit from you know what.
So let me ask you, I know you guys have done so many interesting investigations because you're right there in the middle of very unusual historical location. Have you had any recent, or have you revisited any of the old places that you've been investigating?
As a matter of fact, well, as you know, we're kind of like the last bastion of the Old West out here. We did a couple investigations in the last year that turned out to be really, really interesting, and Mark can attest to it. And actually, everybody here was involved.
Okay.
And we actually did the brothels again.
Okay.
Just a few months back. I think it was February or March, before the COVID thing really, really kicked off. And we actually got some pretty interesting results from that one also.
Okay. And because a lot of these brothels, some of them have they been converted to casinos and things like that, or are there still any of the original buildings per se?
Funny you should bring that up. Deadwood History, they're the ones that run the Adams House and whatnot in Deadwood. Mm-hmm. The brothels, where they're at in Deadwood, you know, it's the upstairs. The downstairs are businesses, casinos and T-shirt shops and what have you. But the upstairs stayed the brothels, mm-hmm. and the brothels, they've actually revamped it. I want to get in there now because they've revamped it to how it was.
Oh, really?
Tours now. So now I want us to get in there to see if anything's kind of agitated and if it's acting up now because of the renovations they've done.
Yeah, because I've heard that happens quite often, that renovations stir things up and you get a lot more activity, or places that you thought that nothing was happening, all of a sudden you get complaints about weird things happening. And I know sometimes even from the land that you could just go to some place that doesn't look like there's any structure, but something did happen there, or there was something there.
Right.
And a lot of things happened in that area as far as just the overall, it was such a crazy place when it was being settled.
It was. And you want to start, Mark? If you want to talk a little bit about it, that's...
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of significant in the aspect that back in late 1875 is when the first, I guess, miners started coming into what was known as Deadwood Gulch there. Mm-hmm. And but then things didn't start amping up until about 1876. But you have to understand that this whole area out here was part of the great Sioux Lakota reservation that was granted to them back in the Laramie Treaty of 1868. So any white settlers that came out here were actually trespassing. So you have to keep that in mind too, is some of the bad things that happen to them as they come out and things like that. But as we started to progress through the years, Deadwood was a pretty active location as far as a location for trade, mining, supply and demand, that type of thing, transportation. So yeah, I mean, so a lot of stuff that went on, murders, suicides, a lot of that negative activity, and which we all know kind of helps us as investigators to the paranormal when it comes to how that imprints upon the environment. And then, you know, as a result of that, then that's when we get called in to investigate all of those little tidbits of activity that people report happening. And which is really kind of nice, because once you understand the history of this location of Deadwood and the surrounding area, it's better for us when we investigate. Hopefully we can tie in some of those historic events that are known to what's happening in the paranormal. So it's kind of interesting when you run across a piece of evidence that you can actually say, "Holy crap!" You know, that's part of what really happened back in the day. So yeah, there's something to this, you know.
For instance, when we were in the Broadlands proper the last time, Mark and I were in one of the main rooms, and I guess that's where you sat and kind of waited your turn, for lack of better terms. I don't know what you'd call it. Anyway, and Mark put out some money on the table, and we thought, as a trigger object, maybe we could get somebody, some kind of interaction. What we got were 2 EVPs that were male. One said, "This is horrible," but it said, "At least I'm not Jewish," and the other one was, "Let me buy some of that."
Wow.
Crazy. Because that was something we weren't expecting.
Let me ask you something, because didn't everything change over there once they discovered gold? Wasn't that what? Because before it was just...
That's what kicked off moving people into the hills. Right. Was the discovery of 1870.
Like everybody ran over there. All of a sudden it was like, that's the place to go because of the discovery of gold.
Right. Well, and actually, what's interesting is... Custer, George Armstrong Custer in the 7th Cavalry had actually come into there. They had been directed by the president and the government to come into the Black Hills in 1874 to kind of search out and make a survey of the Black Hills for the what the value of the Black Hills was, because at the time the government was negotiating with the Native Americans to purchase the Black Hills. Okay. And so one of Custer's edicts was to come in, survey the area, and also look for an appropriate location for a military installation to help with the enforcement of the treaty tenets. Okay. So, but what they found was gold down on French Creek, down by Custer, and that was the end of it. They sent a writer out to I think it was to Cheyenne to put off a telegraph that they found gold, and by the time Custer had gotten back that fall to his fort up in the North Dakota territory, Fort Abraham Lincoln, people were already trying to come into the Black Hills, and it was the Army's job to basically stop them and keep them out, because they were trying to enforce that treaty.
Which worked for about 15 minutes.
Right.
I was going to say, you know what, when it's a gold thing, it's like, forget it. Now, let me ask, that old, it's been already a few years, Deadwood, which, by the way, personally, I love that Deadwood series. I think it was HBO that produced it. How accurate is it? Because I know Hollywood sometimes makes up stuff. Because I know that in that series, the characters were even talking or conversing the way people would back in those years.
That's a good point.
Is that accurate? Was that an accurate portrayal of what was going on then?
Marlene, I think the way they talked was pretty accurate, because there was a lot of, curse words and what have you.
Every other word.
I have to maybe disagree with Mo on this, and I'll tell you why. Because if you read any of the things about the Deadwood series, they talk about it being more of a kind of a Shakespearean take on the old Deadwood. So with their language, the way they spoke and things like, sure, they used nasty language, but I don't think it was in the same vein as what you see on the show.
I think what it comes down to, depending on the type of person.
Well,
higher class people aren't going to throw out the curse words and stuff like your regular layman going to go out and dig in the dirt kind of guy.
But I don't think it was as prevalent as how they showed it on the show, and the show took a lot of liberties with historical events that actually took place. And I mean, they show on there one part of it where they showed Seth Bullock, being with Wild Bill Hickok, shooting out with some other people. Well, that never happened. In fact, Seth Bullock showed up. Him and Soul Star showed up on the day that Hickok was shot and killed.
Right. That was one of those things that Hickok basically showed up to get killed in a way, right?
Well, yeah, he had a premonition. He told his good buddy that he kind of figured that this was going to be his last camp.
Boy, that was pretty on the money.
Yeah, and he had only been in town for maybe 2 weeks,
a couple weeks,
before he was shot and killed. So he was, and he was looking for, he had always been that kind of the guy that was out on the edges of the Wild West, so to speak, trying to.
Right. That's where he got that reputation, right? As like a crazy kind of guy. Yeah.
And Deadwood, the Black Hills, were like Mo had mentioned earlier, was on the edge of that Wild West at that time. The Wild West was pretty much, being tamed, but the Deadwood area and the Black Hills area was kind of like the last vestiges of that. So that he was kind of looking to keep, pushing forward with his reputation and stuff. But he was going blind. He was going bald.
He's getting old. Is that what he's getting old?
He was, and most people, truth be told, most people in the camp really, weren't real happy that he was there, because they thought, just a big blowhard. We're just to make a living. We don't care about this guy because, we're trying to make a living, and this guy's going along with his reputation and, being kind of a braggart. And so a lot of people didn't really have much to do with him.
Well, from what I understand, also back then, one day you could be a lawman, and the next day you could be in trouble with the law. Like, they kind of switched out very easily between being a gunslinger, a lawman, and an outlaw.
Yep, absolutely. And I think some people seem to think that maybe when Wild Bill came into town, that they were kind of worried that he was going to try to come in and be the law and things like that. And, he just really didn't have any desire to do so. I mean, his initial thought was just to come in and dig for gold, because he was just newly married. And so he was thinking, well, I'm going to come in and try to get a gold mine and try to get some gold. And then he realized, well, darn, that's hard work. So he decided to go and hang out. He knew some guy that ran the Nuttall and Mann's Saloon Number 10 knew him, and told him, Bill, why don't you hang out in my bar, make it your home base? And he's and looking at it as a business opportunity. Hey, I got the great Wild Bill sitting here playing cards and drinking in my saloon. So, he was hoping to bring business in off of Wild Bill's name.
Why did he get who and why did he get shot after such an adventurous life? What happened?
Yeah, there's so many different things. I mean, some say that the guy that shot him, they had been playing cards earlier, and Wild Bill had basically wiped him out, and then Wild Bill had tossed him some money so that he could have, he can, get something to eat later on, and some people say that was kind of an affront to him, kind of disrespected him. And so, but we'll never really know. I mean, I think a lot of it may just have been too that, hey, I'm going to make a name for myself, and, I can run around and say, hey, I'm the guy that shot and killed Wild Bill. But,
right. Sometimes those guys, they kind of, when you look at back, people over there could get shot very easily over something insignificant. It really didn't take that much for somebody to pull a gun on you.
And, and it's funny because after he was shot and killed and they had the trial, Jack McCall was the guy's name that killed Wild Bill. When they had his trial, it was a minor's trial. Well, the thing that's interesting was Deadwood at the time was basically outside of the United States. It was the United States at the time.
Well, so, the Dakota Territory, right?
In a Dakota Territory, but it wasn't part of the United States. Right. So the miners, kind of were sitting around thinking, well, darn, if we find him guilty and hang him, then the United States Marshals could come in and arrest us all for murder, for killing this guy, because the trial, they would say, was illegal because it wasn't part of a true recognized court.
Exactly.
So they decided, they gave him a horse and a saddle and said, get the hell out of town.
Bye.
So he was kind of dumb. He went to Wyoming and was bragging in a bar that he shot and killed Wild Bill, and so I guess a couple U.S. Marshals were in there at the time, and they arrested him and brought him back to the territorial Capitol in Yankton, tried him there and hung him.
And hung him, yes.
And then left the noose on him when they buried him.
So you mean that's what he got for having such a big mouth? What a dumbass. Now I want to ask you the obvious, and even though are there any supposed sightings of Wild Bill?
Now I'm going to let Leanne talk and Kaylee talk real quick. Okay. You guys can just go on first.
I don't know any.
Yeah, she probably not going to know.
Yeah. I'm new. I don't know.
Well, I mean, and the reason why I say this, that I ask, and I mean it like tongue-in-cheek, because a lot of these places, everybody thinks that only famous people haunt. And there's so many people that went through there that they weren't notorious, but they could very well be the ones that are haunting there. God knows things were so crazy. But everybody always wants to say, it's the ghost of Wild Bill Hickok that got murdered. Have there been any supposed sightings of him?
I've never heard of any. Really.
No? Okay. No. I'm surprised. Yeah. You would think that they would have tried to keep on trading on his name.
In all of my walkings through of the Deadwood buildings and whatnot, I've never picked up Wild Bill Hickok, but so that doesn't mean he can't be seen, but I've never sensed the energy of it.
You know what? Maybe we got shot. That doesn't see that he was maybe ready to go and he just didn't stay behind. It's like, I'm out of here. I'm out of here. And
we did investigate where it happened.
Okay.
We never got any evidence that would even indicate Wild Bill was around. I mean, we got other pieces of evidence that were, I think we got a picture of what we think was a child or a young kid.
Okay.
But we never got anything having anything to do with Wild Bill whatsoever.
The only thing close, I think, and everybody, we still talk amongst ourselves on occasion, is we had a film, it was 3 or 4 years back. We were upstairs in the brothels, and I don't know, was it you asking for Wild Bill? I can't remember. They had asked us to specifically ask for Wild Bill.
Okay.
And I'm in a doorway of a room, right? I'm half in the hallway, half in the room kind of thing.
Okay.
On the hallway, and then Ricky or whatever said, remember he thought he heard footsteps. Something's coming, and you know how somebody invades your personal space.
Right.
I hate to do this, right? But, somebody invaded your personal space, and I looked, and there was somebody there. And I about, and fell back in it. Because I'm not used to having anything in my face.
Right.
I can see that it's Wild Bill. I know, I can remember the dude had long hair and a mustache. That's all I can tell you.
Okay.
That would say, oh my God, that was Wild Bill. I don't think so. I don't think it was.
That could have described
exactly.
Guys
that were there at that time.
Right. People don't realize that back then, that overgrown long hair and
like that before, so
right.
That was pretty significant.
It was kind of weird. It was weird to say the least.
But the camera crew really wanted it to be Wild Bill.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, because I know that during that time it wasn't only the gunfights. There was what was it? You had fires and even diseases that ran through there. I mean, people, like you said, that thing about the child dying. There were other things that killed people that were living there, like the regular people, in other words, right?
And now that you brought that up, I want Danny to tell you, she's been on the team a couple of years now, but she's been with us, and she's been into the brothels, and she's been on the different investigations we've done in Deadwood. And it's kind of interesting to get her take on it, too.
Okay.
And you want me to talk about the brothels?
Sure.
So the brothels definitely have a little bit of a crazy vibe. I've been in there a couple times now. I can pick up some of the old familiar sounds, and I can hear, people talking and see that. And I have seen, I do believe I've seen a child in the brothels.
Okay.
But yeah, it's pretty interesting to be able to kind of sense those old memories that kind of come in there. There's been a few times too we've had some kind of that creepy back of the neck hair standing up feelings in there too, but I'm pretty curious to get back in there now that they've redone it and see if that's changed it. I know that they had a little bit of goings on during the remodel because I've chatted with them about it, but yeah, it's pretty interesting to feel those old memories.
Right, because you would think, I imagine, what the employees are the ones that I imagine have the most experiences, right? Because they're there maybe before hours, after hours.
Yeah.
And those are the times, in my experience, the people that when they work there are the ones hanging out that hear stuff or see stuff. And, depending on what it is, then they...
And what we do try to do nowadays, Marlene, is we try to Facebook Live once in a while if the clients are okay with it, and we did it in the brothels, so people can see, hear exactly what we're experiencing at the too.
Okay.
Which I us out a little bit too, because you might hear something or see something, and somebody's watching. Of course, there's people that go off the deep end and say, "Oh God, it's Aunt Martha. She's standing in the corner." Other people, it's completely opposite sides of the spectrum. Other people are like, "You're silly, and this is all BS."
Right.
And then you have the people like us that are kind of in the middle, saying, "Well, that could be something. I don't know what it is, but it's not you," kind of thing.
Right. And the thing is that, and I was, the reason also why I brought up that Deadwood thing is that, and I know it's Hollywood, but it shows you how there's so many sources for active hauntings because of the life that people live there. And also, some of these brothels were active all the way into the 80s, I believe?
1980.
Yeah.
Okay, so contrary to everybody thinking, well, this happened, 100 years ago or 150 years ago, it's like, no, maybe there's stuff there that happened that's, as far as the haunting is concerned, that's a lot more recent.
You bring up a good point. Sometimes, especially in Deadwood when we investigate, it's kind of like peeling back the layers of an onion. What era are we dealing with at this point? Is it somebody from the 40s or is it somebody from the 1880s? And you really got to dig deep trying to figure that out. And the neat thing is that's why we have Danny with us nowadays. See, she can help us.
Well, I imagine I imagine as a psychic on there, you probably come across, I don't know how you sense them or if you see them, how they're dressed, or let's face it, if they're working in a brothel, they're prostitutes, but the mindset had to have been something different than, let's say, when Deadwood was, Western frontier versus in the 70s, for example.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it was a house up in Lead, maybe, that we were in, that used to be an old miner's house. Is that where we were?
Yeah.
And I think I was walking through just with the two guys. We must have been just doing a walkthrough, and I got touched on my breast and my butt.
Oh, you're kidding me.
I didn't touch it all, but, that would have been a house filled with all men.
Yes.
Oh, right. Because, as you know, we have a pile of equipment we use.
Right.
We were using Pellicer at the same house that Danny's describing, and Mark and I were downstairs where their bedrooms were. And there were footsteps going across the top, like somebody's upstairs. And so I pointed upstairs, and our obelisk, it was kind of cool. It said, "finger raised." And I was pointing, upstairs.
Wow.
Exactly. And you're like, what the heck is that? Where's that coming from?
Yeah. That's incredible.
Right.
This actually is watching you. That's
right. It was really...
It's an intelligent haunting there.
It's neat for, like, say, Mark and I and rescue investigators. For Danny, sometimes not so fun, because she can see stuff, apparently, that we can't. So, yeah.
Let me ask you, have you been called into cases where sometimes they've put up either new buildings, new houses, new apartments, and then stuff starts happening, and of course it's because of what was there once upon a time.
Yeah, that lady over, well, obviously you're not from here, but on the east side of town here, there was a new construction. These houses were like 5-10 years old, maybe. Mm-hmm. It used to be a pasture. Excuse me. And we got all kinds of crazy stuff out of there. We got EVPs like that one. It was a lady said, "I'm coming." Okay. Exactly. I'm coming. There was EVPs that said, "I don't want to die." Wow. There was all kinds of crazy stuff. And what we were thinking is these were pioneers that were coming out, to this area.
Right.
And then whatever tragedy might have befallen them. And, somebody that's very sick saying, "I don't want to die," kind of thing. We don't know.
Yeah.
But it was interesting, to say the least.
Well, I think, I think a lot of times people don't realize that back then, so many things could very easily kill you. You could get lockjaw from tetanus. You could get a cut. You could get
exactly
anything that now you think you wouldn't die of. Back then, you could very easily die from something very simple. And what was it? I think the average lifespan back there was like 50 years. I think was the average lifespan for people.
Talking on her dead.
Oh, so am I.
Oh yeah, you too now. Yeah.
What's the name of this? Oh my God, she's a real famous. I can't believe I can't. Calamity Jane. Anything having to do with Calamity Jane? Because she was out there, wasn't she?
Yes, she was.
Yeah. She's actually buried right next to Wild Bill up in Mount Moriah.
Oh, really?
Deadwood.
Yeah, she passed away in Terry. What was it, 1903 or something like that? So yeah, so she was a pretty big fixture out here.
Okay. And is she cited or anything, or has anybody ever said anything about seeing?
Not really.
Mm-mm.
So she's. Is there any I guess, how can I say it? Have any of the, well, I guess it would have to be an intelligent haunting that you've come actually identified themselves? Somebody that you could follow back through historical records, or not at all? And by this, I know that's very difficult. I know that.
As you know, as an investigator, it would be awesome if they would sit in a chair next to you, like CNN interview, and say, "My name's Bob, and this is what I was all about."
Yeah.
We get snippets of what they did or what they, where they lived and whatnot, but you never, I don't know why, but you don't get a name. Once in a while we'll get a name, but it doesn't really correspond to what's going on, if that makes sense.
Sure. No. I understand. And, nowadays that we're so used to everything being noted,
right.
Back then people were transient, and you could make up, hey, I'm going to give myself this new name now that I'm in Deadwood, whatever.
Bring that up when we investigate the Adams house, which we do every year with Deadwood history. We do it for them as a charity kind of thing.
Okay.
But we get all kinds of crazy stuff in this house. Anybody can come investigate with us when we do this, and we hand out our equipment. But anyway, we've gotten EVPs and stuff that have nothing to do with the home, the location, or anything.
Right.
Kind of wondering if that's Bob from Cleveland just floating by saying, "Hey, what's happening?" and he's on their merry way. We don't know.
Right.
We don't.
Exactly.
Or could the people that
are on the tours.
that are on the tours.
We don't know.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Some of them, it's like they make an appearance and you really have no idea. Or even sometimes, even let's say for the sake of argument, that they actually gave you a name, even a full name.
Right.
It's back, and we're talking about when it was a frontier town. They kept very poor records back then. About the only times you made the newspapers were if you were an outlaw or like a Wild Bill Hickok, but the majority of people running around there were like unknowns.
Right.
We did get this as many years ago. Excuse me. When BHPI first got together, we were investigating a home on the west side of town. And it was moved there, 1908? The Chambers?
Yeah.
Anyway, we got an EVP that said Kara. Okay, easy enough, right?
Okay.
And the people that owned the house had a fire in the basement, so everything was gutted. It was just 2x4s in the lath and plaster. They'd pull all the drywall down. Mm-hmm. And as the lath off, on the inside in 1908, it had the people's names that lived there or worked on the house.
Okay.
Kara, which was cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if she was a family member. I don't know if she was helping with the house. I have no idea.
Interesting. See, stuff like that, that's like...
Right, makes your arm hair stand up, because you're like, what? Why?
And now let me ask you, because of course we're going to the frontiers, because that's what, that area is more well known for, but let's face it, in between all those intervening years, murders take place, other things happen. Have you come across any investigation with something that was more recent as far as the cast of characters that are involved? Family members or, a murder or something, but not necessarily having to do with, back during those years.
And I would have to defer to Danny on that because she's got far more insight than any of us.
I think what comes up for me there is like Mary's house.
In Belfouche.
Yeah. The man that was living in that house before one of the owners probably maybe 2 generations back. There was some crazy stuff that went on in that house, and his energy was kind of still making his presence known there, and he wasn't the best character, and he kind of showed his presence that way to the family that was living there now. I guess that's probably the most current thing that stands out to me.
And then we got the EVP, or the little kid, because they were talking about things in the kitchen.
Right.
We're falling, and we were in the kitchen investigating, of course, and we have our equipment. We had a recorder out there, and I had asked, I said, who knocked all the wine bottles off? I can't remember, his bottles of some sort. And it was a child's voice said, it was me.
Oh.
I don't know who it was.
So let me ask you, when you guys, let's say you go out on an investigation and you confirm, okay, you guys do have paranormal activity. We've captured evidence. What do you guys do? Do you just give them the evidence and walk away? What do they tell you? Look, what do we do? Do you guys have them out, refer them out? How do you guys, if any, do you go beyond just the investigation?
Right. What we used to be able to do, all we could do was observe and report.
Right.
Say this is captured, yada, 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 and so on and so forth.
Right.
Now we have Danny on the team. So if it's something, not friendly or whatever, she can help the clients with getting rid of it or understanding what's going on a little better than we can.
Danny, let me ask you, as far as, have you been able to cross anybody over that's just confused? Not somebody that's dug their heels in and said, I'm going to stay here haunting because, for example, this is my house, whatever.
Right.
That they've just kind of like lost their way, maybe you help them like, by the way, you're DEAD, you're dead. Some of them I know haven't caught on with that.
I definitely have had some experiences with that, and actually that first house we're talking about is kind of the house that brought us together, Mary's house. Okay. And actually, the team actually kind of put me to the test there. I didn't know they were testing me.
Yes, we did.
But there's some pretty cool things that happened there. And actually, yes, the man that we're talking about, he had kind of dug in his heels because he was a very good person when he was living. He didn't cross. Okay. And actually didn't really realize that until I had gotten home. And I pulled up in my driveway. It was late in the night. We had been trying to clear the house of his energy, and the team was there. My daughter and I were working on the house, and it was like midnight. I pulled up in the driveway. My headlights were on the garage door, and I just kind of like sighed, like, oh my God, I'm so exhausted because we worked hard there. And when my headlights turned off, all of a sudden I saw him surrounded by angels, and he was kneeling, and he had his head down, and he said, deliver me from evil.
Okay. And
I was like, okay, that's it. House. I'm done. I'm done.
It's like, okay.
It's probably the first time I had experienced that, and I've had a couple of experiences similar since then. But
and I'm gonna ask you, have you had anybody follow you home after an investigation or weird stuff happened after you got home? Come on.
Well, Mark had us investigate his house once.
Okay, what happened?
It's kind of weird because when we first moved into the house, I was still working in California at the time, but my wife was staying at the house, and she kept noticing the windows would always be open. Okay. And she'd always close them and lock them before she'd leave the house, and then when she'd come home, and she'd find them open, and it was always on one side of the house.
Yeah, right.
And so, she thought that was kind of strange. And then every once in a while, once I got there, you'd hear like what sounded like somebody walking up the stairway and walking around in the kitchen and stuff. But outside, and it wouldn't happen all the time. It just, from time to time, and it'll be quiet for a while, and then every once in a while we'll get a few things that'll happen. But then it's kind of funny because after some investigations, after coming home, it feels like sometimes things will ramp up a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But for like a day, and then boom, it's gone. And so I don't know if it's necessarily where I brought anything home, or if it's just what maybe is already there is just saying,
maybe a residual, whatever.
You know, why are you cheating on me? I don't know.
They got a cool EVP from Mark's house down in his basement. It was awesome. We were like in his. It's where your water heater is.
Oh, the mechanics room.
The mechanics room. Anyway, because this is years ago. So I said, "Hey, do you like it?" And the reply was, "I love it." Okay, fine. You stay. I don't care about my house.
Yeah, my wife would be aware of it. Because every once in a while, you get a few things that happen, and then there's nothing for a while.
Right, right. Yeah, it's like almost cyclical sometimes. You don't know sometimes exactly what the cycle is, but yeah, it's like
exactly.
You don't know exactly what triggers it, but sometimes there's something going on, that you just it's on the ghost. And sometimes it's just residual for some reason.
It might be. And we had a thing here at the house this couple years back where we were hearing door slam, and we go down to the back of the house, nothing. There's nothing around.
Okay.
And my wife's a skeptic. Anyway, and all I did, I came out in the living room and I said, "Hey, if you're going to live here, you got to help clean." And then nothing ever happened again.
It's like, what? Oh no.
I'm going to move next door.
That's great. Hey, you want to exorcise a ghost? All you need to tell them is, hey, you got to pitch in with a cleanup. All right, otherwise it's like, that's it, man. We cleared the house. That's great. That's a fantastic story. As far as I'm just curious. Whenever you get I know because of this thing that's kind of crazy, but before, was there any type of cycle that you guys would be called in for more investigations versus other times of the year? Was there like a time period that you noticed?
But I don't know if it has to do with hauntings themselves.
Okay.
It's fall in the winter, we get more calls and we get more active. But I'm thinking spring and summertime, the weather's nice, people are outside, neighbors barbecuing, going to the lake, what have you. They're not at home all the time.
Right.
And I think in the winter, everybody's kind of hunkered, especially in this part of the country, unlike Miami where you're at. But people hunker down and, kind of like live in their house.
Right.
And I think this kind of adds to it. They watch too many shows on TV.
Yes.
Satan and his loyal minions live in their basement. And it's
oh my God. That's like, unfortunately, that's very accurate. It's like, I'm going to run out of my house and spend the night in the car, but didn't you go look to see what it was? No, because I know it's a ghost. And it's like, are you sure about that?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
People don't realize sometimes, like, people, they prime themselves, like you said, because they watch too many of these shows. And they never even bother to find out, what is that? Is that an animal? Is that a draft? Is it just whatever, anything? No, they just like, it's the ghost and they're giving you guys a call.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I pride myself or our team on is because just because somebody says, and I'm exaggerating, but Satan and his loyal minions live in my basement, that does not make it so.
I know.
It's an investigation. The first thing we're going to try to do is debunk every claim they have.
Right.
Not being mean or anything, but there might be a logical explanation for what's going on.
Yeah.
Once we exhaust all of that, then you start thinking, well, what could it be?
Right. Most people don't want, by the way, once upon a time, people would be glad if they would say, no, there's nothing here. But nowadays, they're kind of disappointed a little bit because they're just hoping that you're going to not only tell them that there is paranormal activity, but you're going to give them the name of the ghosts and all, etc., so that they could, exactly. They really don't know what they're doing. I mean, it's like, let me ask you, is there part of, have you ever had any type of, I want to say, it's not a group haunting, but any type of sighting where some people have even called it like time travel, where they'll see a bunch of people or reenactment of a scene. Do you guys have had any type of haunting of that or people seeing something like that?
you and Scott investigated that place in Deadwood, where you guys interacted with whatever it may have been, and that person, whatever it was.
Well, but she's talking more of a group site, like what they'll often have, like at Gettysburg,
right?
Where people a battalion or a company.
Like we saw a whole battle going on.
Right. So I mean, I can't off the top of my head think of anything.
Or even auditory, nothing like that. Because I know sometimes people will say they don't see anything, but they'll hear like gunshots. And I know in some places it's like, it doesn't have to be ghostly, but.
Hey, at the Adams house. Yeah. One of the claims, and I think a couple of us even experienced this too, that some of the claims is that when they were, when the people that work there are in there cleaning and doing stuff, they'll hear people, just a bunch of people talking like it's at a party. And go and investigate, and nobody will be in the house. Okay. Well, we were there during some of our investigations, and we had actually kind of heard the same thing, and it'd be like, okay, where in the hell is that coming from? And so we'd go to that part of the house, and then you'd hear it coming from another part of the house. And then we'd ask, the investigators that were in the gift shop to go outside, make sure there's not anybody outside and talking and stuff.
Like ambient noise.
And it's the middle of the night and nobody's around. So in that context, we've had something auditory, but we've had I don't think we've ever had any people where they've cited numerous apparitions, moving through a place or anything.
And what's the history on that house, on the Adams house? What is it? What's the background on it?
Well, the Adams, it's a mansion. Yeah, it's a mansion, and it was built in the the Victorian style,
1896 or something.
Well, yeah, it was built in 1892.
Okay.
Harris Franklin, and he was a liquor wholesaler in town, so he was pretty rich.
Smart.
Yeah, he built the place. And it was, a big write-up in it in the papers, and they lived there for many years, had a lot of parties in the house, celebrations and things like that. Okay. And then he sold it to his son, who lived there for a period of time. And then his son, Nathan, sold it to W.E. Adams. We call it the Adams house now. And then Mr. Adams lived in the house up until the time he passed away. And Mr. Adams actually passed away in the home.
In 1934.
Yeah, 1934. So.
And what happened after 1934? It went into another set of hands, or what?
Go ahead.
Well, his wife, she basically just kind of shuttered it up, and she moved to California. And then every year she would come back to Deadwood to certify her residency, but she would never stay in the house. She would always stay at the Franklin Hotel in town there, and she had always said that the house was haunted. And some people say,
she was saying it was haunted way back then.
Yes, some people seem to think that she may have said this to keep people away from the house. To keep, trespass. Things like that. So,
and an interesting side note, because she said it was haunted, for the 50 years or whatever it was that it was vacant, it was never vandalized. Like you think teenagers would dare each other, I dare you to go in there, or like break dishes.
Right.
Nothing was ever done to the home, ever.
But lots of crazy things that went on for Mr. Adams, because his first wife and his daughter and his grandbaby, like, they all passed in a very short period of time.
Like within 24 hours.
Yeah, 48.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
What happened? What did they catch a disease, or what happened?
Well, no, his daughter, it was Helen.
Helen, yeah.
She was living in California with her husband, and Mrs. Adams at the time, what was her name? I'm drawing a blank.
Coming to me.
Anyways, she, since her daughter was pregnant and was about ready to have the child, said, well, I want to travel to California to visit and be there when the grandchild's born. Well, they had diagnosed her with cancer, And the doctor basically said, no, you probably shouldn't travel because it's going to probably be bad for you. And she said, well, I don't care. I want to be there, for the child. So she was driven back to California. And when she got there, she passed away.
Wow.
Well, grief of her mother passing away, Helen gave premature birth.
Oh my gosh.
And she passed away in childbirth, and then the baby died the next day. So all of his family passed away within a 48-hour period of time, and Mr. Adams was here, was still here in Deadwood when he got the news. So that had to have been a pretty impactful thing on the environment of the home.
Oh, absolutely.
And you can from time to time when you go in there, you can. Yeah, I mean, even me. I mean, like Mo's always said this before. We have the sense of a rock, but there's times you can go in there and actually kind of feel like it's a little bit depressed. But
right.
But then
as an investigator. Yeah. You've investigated. You walk into a room and it feels just normal, and you walk into a room and all of a sudden it's super oppressive and you don't know why. Yes. That's the kind of things you run into at the Adams house.
Right, yeah. You pick up on it, and sometimes it is an active haunting, sometimes it's just something that's bled into the fabric of the place, especially intense feelings like that.
Right. Or instantly jump to the dark side. Oh God, it's Satan. Right? But as investigators, we have to go, okay, why does it feel this way? Now we have to go in and figure out why.
Right.
Versus just sitting back and go, oh, let's don't go in there. That room is kind of creepy, and we're not going to go in there now.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I've seen that some people, it's like, well, but that's what you're there for.
Exactly.
I think it's intelligent haunting there because we will have a lot of activity that interacts with us.
Yes,
but then also, if we have a group that's very disrespectful in the house,
right,
they will start acting with us all together. Yep. None.
Really? It's like everybody packs up and just like, okay, we're out of here for a bit. Isn't that
exactly?
I think that that definitely is an indicator that you do have an intelligent haunting there versus something residual that would just you would hear it no matter who was there or what anybody was doing.
With the Adams house specifically is it seems, and of course we can't document this as fact, but it does seem that we have interacted with members of the original Franklin family and the Adams family as well.
Okay.
You don't know what you get until you start investigating. Mm-hmm. And then say our periscopes go off. Or is this Mr. Franklin? No, it doesn't go off. Is this,
right.
Are you one of these? And it goes off. It's kind of hit and miss.
Well, I will say that I had a pretty interesting experience. It would have been last year during the tours, and it was kind of a personal experience. It actually was kind of heartwarming because we had a group upstairs in Mr. Adams' room, and I was given the tour, and one of the gentlemen in the group was a little bit drunk, and he was starting to get a little loud, and I told him that, listen, you can't keep this up or you're going to have to leave. Uh-huh. And he was saying, well, this is a bunch of BS and stuff. And
right.
So finally he left. And when he left, to the house, I apologized. I apologized to the house and the people, the spirits, right. and I said, hey, I'm very sorry for that. We never intended to bring anybody in being disrespectful like this, and so I apologize. It's on us. And last night I was coming into the house, and because we were ending up with a spirit box thing, and as I was walking in the house past the library, they had a group in there, and they had the obelisk, and as I walked by the room, the obelisk went off and called my name.
Really?
It said Mark. Yeah, and so to me, it was almost kind of like it was recognizing me and the respect for them, and we've always gone in that house with respect. So
well, we do on every investigation, but we never go in like y'all puffed up like prairie chickens, like, oh, we're gonna kick your butt or what have you. We're not gonna do that.
Yeah,
that's not what we're about.
Right, yeah. And I know I know, unfortunately, that a lot of them do, what is it, that provocation or stuff like that, and I always think that that's a bad idea. Really bad idea. You know, or, you know, that you're trying to, like, you know, like, yeah, okay, you know, like, in a confrontation with, you don't, at the end of the day, you don't even know, first of all, if there's anything there and exactly what it is. So, yeah, I think that's not good.
You know this as a fellow investigator. Mm-hmm. Let's just say that we're not dead, right? And a whole bunch of people just come in your house and start barking questions and all this stuff without being, you know, polite. You're going to be like, "What the hell are you here? And why are you here?"
Exactly. It's it's not. It usually, and even for investigative purposes, it's just not good. It's not good. Right. And if by any chance you do have any type of confrontational or darker energy, you're going to leave that family with a big problem on their hands. When you pack up your stuff and leave, they're going to be like, hey, they're going to be calling you up a couple of hours later. You need to come back.
And funny, when Mark was talking about the Adams house, Danny, when she's with us, when we're doing the tours and stuff at the Adams house, when we go upstairs into Mary Adams' room, she always gets results. Always.
I can usually always get Mary to interact with
Mary.
me.
It seems it's Mary. It seems like it's her.
Well, and one of the cool experiences, my husband is a big skeptic, and funny, right? Because he's married to a medium. But he came on an investigation one year, he and my daughter, and we were using a mag light on the bed, and I just said, Mary, if you're in the room with us, can you turn the mag light on? Oh. And boom, it came on. I thought he was going to piss his pants.
Yes, I can imagine. It's like, all right, there you go. I love
She'll
it.
usually be in her room.
Yeah. Let me ask you: Have you guys come across? And the reason why I'm going to ask this: ghosts of any animals or anything having to do with something?
So we think we may, especially at the Adams, because we know they had. I guess they were pit bulls or something. They look like boxers. Or Boston Terriers. I can't remember. But anyway. This is kind of funny. Mr. Adams named every single dog Patsy, so if one tipped over, they got a new one. They named it Patsy again. That's kind of cool because he's old.
All right.
Get their name. But it does seem like every once in a while people are like, hey, something just brushed against my leg, you know, down low and stuff, which is
well. Right. And Danny was on the floor in Mr. Adams' room, trying to get. And it was a dog, and she was like trying to get it to come over and
that was the first time I was there, and I had never been in the Adams house before, and the dog was in that room where the dog's collar typically is. Yeah.
Right, and think about it, even if you called that, hey, Patsy, it's like, okay, because they named all their dogs Patsy. You know, it's like, yeah, you're probably, because, and the reason why I say that is that I've heard a lot of times that, especially if people have kept pets for a long time, that exactly what you're describing, if they don't see, or they'll see something like, you know, run across, you know, like, you know, very low to the ground, that kind of deal.
It's really funny when we do the tours with Deadwood History at the Adams House in October, and someone might say that you've got 15 people, everybody's bent over. Come here, Patsy. Come here. Come here. It's funny.
It really does.
Patsy hates that. So let me ask you: are you guys preparing? Are you going to be doing something for Halloween this year over there at that Adams house?
We work with Deadwood History every October, and we do the Adams House with him. We'll do 3 weekends, and we won't go Deadwood. That's a big Halloween festival they have in Deadwood.
Okay.
But there's too many drunk people and people in costumes, and, you know, people aren't taking it seriously. So we do the first couple of weekends in October. And that's all by Deadwood History. We just show up and do what we do. They're the ones that sell tickets and do all that fun stuff.
Right. That,
and usually what they will ask us to do is usually a March, April timeframe. We'll go in just as our team, just, you know, and investigate and see if we get any new information or, you know, new interactions that we can share with the people on the tours come October.
Okay.
Sure.
And how about any area there? And sometimes I've seen this where there's certain areas, especially in a town, where it's just businesses don't succeed, and people will say, hey, you know, that's just a place that's got bad luck. You know what I'm saying? The reason why I say that is I know that out there was, or I don't know if there still is, a lot of casinos and stuff, I imagine, that was built on top of old stuff. Do you have an area of town that's like that?
I don't know if we have an area where stuff doesn't work, but Deadwood definitely, for a lack of better terms, almost has a pall over it. About it. It's not like uber dark or anything like that.
Yeah,
but it does have.
Yeah, because see, a lot of the business owners in Deadwood, probably all of them, they embrace the paranormal. There's many of them that you can go in there and, hey, do you have any weird stuff happen here? And oh yeah, as a matter of fact, we do. And I mean, it's kind of
because that's money. That's haunted tours.
Yeah. And one thing I forget, because a lot of times people, when they think of Deadwood, they think of cowboys or lawmen, but there was a lot of miners, and I know that some of the mining could be very dangerous. Right?
Oh yes.
Yeah. Do you guys have any ghosts of any miners out there? Or are there any mines still active?
The Blue Gold Mine, for one. And Danny's had some interactions, if you want to talk about it, with the mining crew, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, just that house we were talking about where the miners, where I got touched. There was quite a bit of activity with the miners there.
Okay, and what do you know? Was it like something that happened as a group to them when they were mining, or they just any idea who they were?
So in the location that I'm talking about, where it was a mining house. It just housed all miners.
Bunk house.
Yep.
Okay, and so was it like a boarding house kind of deal where they stayed at?
Right.
Yep, and just kind of walking through. Guys, we were doing kind of a walkthrough, and what I do is I go through and I try to pick up activity that the house is normally doing to kind of verify for the owners what they might be experiencing, and that was where I was touched a couple of times. Which, doesn't bother me. Obviously, a ghost isn't going to offend me, but yeah, it was quite interesting to be touched in personal, private areas by men that you can't see.
No, I imagine they must have been. It was a boarding house for miners. It's like, yeah. Because what was it? Because even back then, the ratio of men to women was very drastically uneven. There was a lot of guys running around out there and very little women. That's why I guess they had all those brothels, right?
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, they'd bring them, they'd wagon them in from other parts of the country and, to come and work in Deadwood, and to at least, try to keep them in, satisfied or whatever, you want to call it.
I imagine most, like everybody else, I hate to say it, people, it's like, it's for the money. I mean, I imagine they set up those brothels because they knew the ratio of men to women were like very uneven. So it was like, okay, let's go make some money out in Deadwood. Because that's what I understand happened to a lot of these frontier places that were either, that started out as mining towns. That always the ratio of men to women. So they would instantly set up brothels and stuff like that. And let me ask you, I've heard that Seth Bullock, he started a hotel out there also, right?
The Bullock Hotel.
Right. Is that haunted?
It definitely has activity.
It has activity. I don't know if I'd use the H word, but it has activity. And funny you should bring it up. Okay. This is 3 or 4 years we're investigating the Bullock Hotel. We got invited in. Mm-hmm. We had a recorder up on the 2nd or 3rd floor of the motel now. And before the hotel, before it was there, it was like, Tent City, and that's where Seth Bullock and Star had their hardware store.
Okay.
And we're investigating. It's like February. There's like 10 inches of snow on the ground. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. We got an EVP of sawing. Zoom, zoom,
oh, really?
Zoom. So could that be residual of when it was a hardware store? Back in the day, we don't know. But that was really interesting. That's something that we normally don't get.
That is a very unusual, like, EVP.
You're not going to get that modern day at 2 in the morning in a city. You're not going to hear somebody just getting after it with a handsaw kind of thing.
No, you're absolutely right. That is such an unusual thing. And that observation that you made, that apparently before they actually built the structure, which is what a lot of these frontiers towns, they would run out of tents. They would run the businesses before they actually put up a structure. That's very interesting. Very interesting. Wow. Well, guys, thank you so much for spending this time. It has been absolutely wonderful to talk to you guys again. And let me ask you, just for the podcast listeners, what is your website address? So if they want to go and find out about any events.
RockHillsParanormal.com.
Okay.
It's
BH Paranormal.
BH Paranormal.
Yeah.
BHParanormal.com.
Yeah.
And then we also have Black Hills Paranormal on Facebook. And if anything exciting is going on, we'll post that. Because obviously we can't post every single investigation we go on. Because we leave that up to the clients.
Right.
But if the clients are okay with it, and we will post it up, if we're going into a house or a business or whatever, and they're okay with it, we will try to do Facebook Live if we have a good.
Which, by the way, I wanted to ask you about any of these recent investigations, and I know that because of the COVID thing, everything got kind of like. Have you come across any interesting cases recently that you guys investigated?
With our SLS camera, one of the places we didn't lead. These people that are renovating this house, and we're in there, and we're doing the Facebook Live, and Mark's got the SLS camera, so I have to shoot over his shoulder. Okay. But there's a heater just in the middle of the room because they're renovating the house. It's just like some kind of space heater, right. And this thing is trying to move it. I don't know where it was going to move it to, but it's trying.
The heater was moving?
Yeah, no, the heater wasn't moving, but with the SLS camera, we had a figure. And you can see it. Trying to get it to move.
Are you serious? Yeah. Wow.
And that's we made, I'm sure. Like, are you serious?
I think it was also where I got touched on the shoulder there too.
Yeah, it was.
And I thought it was Mo.
Yeah.
Like right now, but like.
Isn't that great when you think all of a sudden you look and it's like nobody's there. It's like, oh, all right. And you don't get scared because, like you said, you're thinking, oh, it's so-and-so that's behind me or right next to me, until that's like that what was it, all those horror movies, the ghosts, where you're in bed and you're thinking you're holding the hand of the person in bed with you, and then all of a sudden you realize it's not them.
And that's the fun thing about investigators, and that's why everybody on our team's gone through a pretty stringent vetting process, is because there are times when most people would scream, run, they're getting the hell out of Dodge.
Sure.
We can't do that. That's not what we're here for. We find out what's going on. Now, you might get unnerved, I guess, unnerved, I guess. Yeah. But you're not running away. You're going to go, okay, why do I feel this way? Okay. What's causing this? Because you won't see us, like I've said earlier, you won't see us run away, but you'll see us. We'll go into a room or wherever it may be, and then we'll come back out, and then we'll ask another investigator, say, hey, come here for a minute. Go in there and tell me what you feel, to make sure it's something that it's not individual, like we're just not freaked out for some goofy reason. Is it something that's really happening that we can actually feel? More than one person, which adds credence to what we're trying to do.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah, and believe it or not, that's what everybody, when you see all these people, it's like, yeah, it's okay to get startled, but at the end of the day, that's what you're there for. You
Exactly.
Go back in there and find out, is this me having a weird moment, or are we talking absolutely something paranormal? That's something you develop after a while. But again, guys, thank you so much. You have been absolutely wonderful. I want to wish you the best of luck, and I'm hoping that you guys can come back, because I really want to talk to you guys, especially maybe after the Halloween season.
Oh yeah. And if we do it next time, if you want, let me know and I can hook you up with it so you can watch too.
Yes.
So you can see what we're.
Yes, absolutely. I would love that. But again, guys, take care. Good luck to you on all your projects. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Marlene.
Bye-bye. Wow. Yeah. Okay. Let me explain. Wow, that's a real. I love talking to Mo. He's great. That he really is. He's I want to say I interviewed him like 3 years ago. I want to say it was 2017 when I interviewed Mo and the rest of his group, and Let me tell you something. They have been together for a long time. He's had that group together for years. And I've said it before on other shows. This is the sign of a great paranormal group. And people don't realize how many groups form and they dissolve. First year, first few months, first couple of years, they just fall apart. They fall apart for a lot of reasons. They fall apart because people are not committed, they think that the paranormal investigation is going to be something like what they see on the shows. It turns out a lot of the things are boring, or there's nothing there, or they don't realize that sometimes the only time that you can investigate because the homeowners there is on a weekend, and they're like, you want me to give up my weekend to go on a investigation? Especially if they've already had one experience where all they went to it was boring. And so, yeah. And then you have also what they call paradrama, where you have a conflict of personalities. So, yes, getting back to my original point, when you find a group like Black Hills Paranormal that's been around for so long, and by the way, they really set a high standard as far as confirming, if you want to call it, that it is something paranormal or supernatural. And that's what you want. And they're very professional. And I say this again, either for the person that's looking for a paranormal group or the person that wants to join a paranormal group. These are the hallmarks that you look for. Okay? You look for a group that's been together long. You look for a group that's got a good leader. It's same thing. If you're looking for a group to come and investigate in your house, you're opening your door to strangers most of the time. This is what you're looking for. You know, how long has this group been together? You know, when I spoke to one of the members, whether it's via email or on phone, were they professional? Because that's what you want to look. You want somebody that's going to be professional. And again, you know, a lot of people say, "Oh, well, you know what? They're," and I think Mo says something about it. He doesn't go in there to debunk it, okay? Because that's not the idea per se. But if you're really truly serious about what's going on, let's say you suspect something's going on in your house, if it's not in your face, for example, you do want somebody that sets a high standard. Because when they come to you with evidence, okay, you can be assured, like, oh, this person or this group is not ready to believe anything, you know. Because that's what you want. You want a group that's going to tell you, look, we looked and we investigated, we didn't come up with anything. Or, look, this is what we found, this is what we think it is. But for them to present something to you, you know, okay, they must have really found something. And, yeah, definitely, and that area, I mean, I know that Hollywood does a lot of things with history, but as far as the Deadwood series, it's one of my favorite series because it was, personally, I like the actors and it was well acted. And as far as Hollywood's concerned, it glamorized it, but it really didn't glamorize it. It really demonstrated how raw life, well, in this case it was Deadwood, but in a frontiers town, in a mining town life was cheap. I hate to say it. Yeah, you could get in trouble for murdering, but just like that story that they talk about Wild Bill Hickok, you know, you could have that same person when another town was a gunslinger. He could have been outlawed, and the next thing you know, they hire him as a sheriff in another town. And the reason for this is because, well, you know, I wrote that book, The Haunted History of the Old West Wicked Ladies, which talks about, you know, I did a lot of research into a lot of these towns, including Deadwood. Sometimes some towns were so out of control that the mayors, you know, the people that were the little government of that town, basically they couldn't, most men that they would hire didn't want the job because the crime, and, you know, they had what they call the tenderloin, which is where they had all the brothels and the saloons and stuff, were so out of control that sometimes they were forced to hire real hard-nosed guys that at some point might have even been outlaws or gunslingers themselves or have been in trouble with the law, because this is what they needed in order to bring law and order to their town as they grew. And I'm sure if any of you've seen that movie Tombstone, which the Earp brothers and Shootout the OK Corral and all of that, and there's a scene in it where Wyatt, he's come to Tombstone and all he wants to do is run a card game, and work in the saloons, and that's where he's looking to make money, and he's bringing his brother in, and there's a point where, in the movie, of course, because of the cowboys and they just can't control them, and crime and shootings, that they're asking him, we need you to be the sheriff. And that happened quite a lot, where in these towns as they grew, there was a lot of money, but at the same time you had so much a rush of people coming in, and I hate to say it, a lot of them of doubtful characters, that you needed a very strong-willed person to step in and bring in law and order, because that's the way back things were back then. All right, and there was in the that book, the part that I wrote about the Deadwood, there was one murder where a couple, I think they had a hotel and a business or a restaurant, something like that, and they had fired somebody that was working for them. And I guess he knew that they kept money, as in cash, there at their business, in their home, because that's another thing. Back then, a lot of times, people, where they slept, their houses and their businesses were all connected in the same building. And I guess he knew that the couple kept money, cash, because of the business. So it wasn't just a disgruntled employee, but that fed it. Bottom line, he breaks in and he had an axe and he basically cleaved it into the lady's head right here. And they caught him. And I guess her husband was not there that day. She had stayed home. She had been in bed or something. She heard a noise and she comes out. And he put like an axe right here, like on the bridge of her nose. And when they caught him eventually, I think that he stole some money, plus he stole some other items in the house, and they found him. They had some, and he tells that he meant to kill the barking dog, but by mistake he killed her. But anyway, he killed the dog with a butcher knife. So anyway, the guy ended up hanging for it. But my point being that back then, in comparison, that you didn't have to be a gunslinger or, a brothel owner or prostitute or one of these wild people. You could be just a normal, business person, trying to make money there, maybe a little restaurant. And you could find back then it was like, this is not like, give me, in other words, no witnesses. How's that? This guy was not about to leave any witnesses behind and even dispatched the dog. And very brutally, by the way. He hung for that crime. As a matter of fact, I forgot to ask him, sometimes some of these areas where they have the gallows at, there's weird stuff that goes on if anybody ever remembers, or if it was ever marked, or if anything was ever built over that land where, they would have the gallows. Which, by the way, back then, public executions, because that's what they would have, this was like an open-air event. This place was surrounded, because I saw a picture of the execution of that guy. It was surrounded by a mob. I mean, a lot of people. This was out in the open when they executed somebody, which of course was psychological, because basically not only were they showing, hey, punishment for a crime, but what they were telling or showing the general populace was, if you do something like this is going to be your end. This is how you're going to end your days, at the end of a rope. And the reason why I bring that up is that circumstances like that, a lot of times, would bring about intelligent and active hauntings. Yeah, that there was even another story where there was a Chinese population that lived there in Deadwood, and supposedly there was a lady, Chinese lady, who was murdered, and this came out in the regular papers of that time, and apparently after she was killed, she was bludgeoned to death, something like that, same thing with an axe or something like that. Shortly thereafter, they rented out where she was staying, you know. They were being pragmatic about it. But what happened was that supposedly there was a reenactment of the crime where they would hear, it was an auditory thing where they would hear like the crime being reenacted when she was killed. And there was an observation that they were saying that they were going to try to like get a blessing for the house, you know, among the Chinese community, but if not, pretty soon that it was going to be very inexpensive to, you know, get that piece of real estate. I don't know if it was a house or an apartment or exactly, you know, what was in it, you know, but yeah, I mean, in other words, there was a lot of different parts of society there in Deadwood that life was very raw out there during those years. And then, like we said, Deadwood had prostitution all the way into the 80s. So if you don't think that a lot of weird and unusual things were taking, that's why I asked them, you know, have you come across hauntings that, contrary to what people want to go back to the, you know, when it was a frontiers town, something much more current. And let's face it, where you have prostitution, you're going to have other types of crime. You know, you have other vice crimes, the casino, money. I mean, a lot of things happen all under that umbrella where, you know, and people don't realize that also that, you know, that the thing about, you know, now it's different because of DNA evidence, but back then, no victim, no crime. People would disappear. Nobody would ever be the wiser. What happened to him? Oh, there goes my happy, so yeah, my dogs had a moment there because they're still having it. But anyway, that a lot of things, again, and the reason why I say this is that when you look at these historical places, you want to immediately jump to the conclusion, you romanticize it, you know, it's the gunslingers, Wild Bill Hickok, and but there's a lot of sordid stuff that happens. Like I said, when you're talking about gambling, prostitution, vice, yeah, a lot of things happen. People disappear, never found again, no victim, no crime. And that's what I'm saying. Sometimes your ghost is something much more modern. Believe it or not, even after that, there was the time of Prohibition. Remember, this area is very close to the Canadian border. There was a lot of, just like in, you know, when anything is illegal, there was a lot of crimes committed around smuggling and booze from, you know, whether it was down south, you know, we had it down here in South Florida where they would bring it up from Bimini in the Bahamas, or up there, you know, when they would cross over from Canada. You know, a lot of that, again, crimes, money, the prohibition, the gangsters, the G-men. That's what I'm saying. You always have to look at who are the possible culprits, if you want to call them that, as to who is really committing the haunting. If that's the case, you have to keep an open mind because it could be a cast of thousands. But anyway, guys, I hope you like this show. I have a lot of great guests coming on. Make sure to look up as a matter of fact, I just released one today, which is The Dead Cast No Shadow, which is a novella, Sybil novella, my number 2. You can find it on Amazon, or you can go to my website, marlenepardo.com, or miamighostchronicles.com. If you want to go to Amazon and look me up as Marlene Pardo Pellicer, you will also find all my books on there. Again, if you have any stories, paranormal stories, weird stories, unusual stories, by all means, get a hold of me, Marlene at miamighostchronicles.com. I would love to hear about it. And thank you so much for spending this time with me and for coming back every week. Take care.